Hey there, this is DIY Life Guide coming at you once again, and today I'm going to be explaining to you how I built a tiny house and why I built a tiny house. This was a 2-year-long journey, cost me around 15 grand to complete the tiny house, but it was totally worth it. Learned a lot of lessons about carpentry and how to build a home through this project. So first question is, why should I build a tiny house? The reason I built this thing is I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. I see living spaces as an art form. I really wanted to live in something that I built completely from scratch with just my 2 hands, and also was able to add certain features like using reclaimed wood. And it wasn't easy to build this house, but it was totally worth it in the end. Make sure if you're starting a tiny house project not to do it for the wrong reasons. Don't do it to show off or to look cool. Just do it to provide yourself with a house. To get started with building a tiny house, you want to ask yourself where exactly you're going to put the tiny house. Do you have land that you own? Do you have land that you can build on? Or are you going to be needing a mobile tiny house that you can park at different sites that you're leasing? If you have a space available, make sure you do a measurement. See how much space you have that's available to build on that isn't too close to the edge of the property line or anything like that. If you are building a tiny house that needs to be mobile, make sure that it fits within the dimensions of a trailer or a chassis that can fit on a regular road. I personally was able to have land to build on, so I decided to build a more permanent foundation that was less mobile. So I did a bit of a hybrid design, and my foundation is more similar to what you would call a skids foundation that is attached to a cement foundation, but also can be unbolted and the house can be pulled out on the 2 beams that run the length of the house. So yeah, it's like a skids type foundation that allows the house to be mobile if it needs to be. But if not, it can be very safely attached to the piers of the house. Because I wanted the option for the house to be mobile, I made it road compatible. In order to have a house that can fit on a flatbed, you're going to want to not have it any wider than 8 feet. And also, the house is 24 feet long, which is just short enough to fit on a flatbed as well. So I chose the dimensions 8 foot by 24 foot when choosing the dimensions of my tiny house. It also fit within the dimensions of my backyards. After you figure out where you're going to put your tiny house, you want to make some type of a schematic or sketch or markup of what the house is generally going to look like. It doesn't have to be super pretty, but you should have it exact enough where you can figure out the lengths of different pieces of wood that you need. You can create a lumber inventory off the schematic. For me personally, I made a sketch that has a breakdown of every piece of lumber that I'm going to need for that framing project. So that way I can count the number of lumber pieces that I need and create an inventory, and then once I have an inventory, I'm able to continue on and gather that lumber slowly over time using reclaimed sources, going to old job sites, finding reclaimed wood on Facebook. This is how I'm able to build my lumber inventory slowly. That way it costs less in the long run. In the schematic that you create for your house, not only are you going to want to have every piece of lumber listed out and its location, but you're also going to want to mark where you're going to put your windows and your doors. That way you can create a window and door inventory and acquire those slowly as well. So all of my windows and doors were either free or were acquired at Habitat for Humanity. So after you have a lumber inventory and you have a window and door inventory, you're also going to want to build an inventory for all the sheathing that you're going to need on the outside of the house. So this will be what seals in the outside of the house from the inside of the house. When you're in the lumber acquisition phase or building materials acquisition phase, you're going to want to be real careful to make sure that the wood and the building materials you get are strong and safe enough to actually build a house out of. And specifically when it comes to getting a bunch of lumber for framing, you want to make sure that the wood is not rotted, doesn't have termite damage, nothing like that, because that kind of stuff isn't going to hold weight and won't be structurally sound. I personally splurged on the sheathing a little bit. I went with the Huber zip system. Couldn't find really all that much reclaimed sheet wood that would have been enough to cover the house, so I decided to buy new with sheet wood, and it would have paid off obviously with the amount of efficiency that new boards have relative to old plywood.